Go.
Good morning, aviators. This is Tahir Mohammed with Edmund Makona and Derek Nseko. We're here today with a special guest from Africa. His name is Raphael Kuuchi, and I'd like to introduce him as my mentor, as Africa's mentor, as someone that has taught a lot of future aviators into the industry and has brought a lot of future aviators into the industry. So today's session will be talking about African aviation and the renaissance that's happening live in real time today. So welcome, Mr. Kuuchi. And Derek, thank you for hosting the show.
Thank you very much for the welcome.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Raphael, especially for joining us today. This is a very special series for African aviation. This series is really all about promoting African aviation's modernization and the positive aspects of doing business with the African aviation industry. So today's theme is aviation leaders. And today, obviously, we have one of the biggest one of them all in Raphael Kuuchi. But specifically for today, we'd like to put a spotlight on a very important initiative for the African aviation industry, the single African air transport market. And we are going to pose a question. The single African air transport market is a reincarnation of the Yamoussoukro decision. But the narrative around the single African air transport market for years has been that it's failing. But we pose the question, are we closer than we think that we are to achieving a liberalized air transport market on the African continent? Welcome, Raphael Kuuchi, and I'm going to dive straight into it right now. SAATM, as we know it better, has more than about 35 states as signatories. 35 countries have made the solemn commitment to the single African air transport market. This is a continent of about 54 states. And I'm reliably told that the 34 states that have made their solemn commitment to SAATM represent about 80% of the air transport market on the African continent. This is a very significant chunk of the African air transport market. So why are we not celebrating these signatories? Is it time to celebrate the fact that we are actually closer to the realization of the single African air transport market? What are your thoughts, Raphael?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. And as you rightly put it, SAATM is a very topical subject today for African aviation because it is going to be what will determine the future prospect of this industry on the continent. And we have 35 states signed the solemn commitment, but for me, it's still early days yet to celebrate. If you recall, during the days of Yamoussoukro, when Yamoussoukro was signed as a decision, eventually 44 African states signed Yamoussoukro, yet its implementation did not go far enough. So with 35 signing now, we're still 9 short of the YD target. But what we need to be excited about is the dimension that African leadership have taken with regards to the single African air transport market. Now, Yamoussoukro was an air transport liberalization policy, which in my view at the time was too much ahead of the stakeholders at the time to actually comprehend and want to implement. Yamoussoukro also came in at a time when the African aviation industry and the African continent as a whole was actually still grappling with the excitement of independence, trying to assert our independence, assert our territorial integrity, trying to ensure that people know that we are sovereign and we have powers and we can do things our own way. That was in the midst of which Yamoussoukro came in. So even though all the heads of states that signed found it a good policy, on the back of it, when it comes to implementation, they thought of like, is this not an invasion of my sovereignty by other states? Why do I give out more than I ought to give out? So there were teething problems. Unfortunately, Yamoussoukro was not built on the bedrock on some of the fundamental policies, regulatory frameworks that ought to be in place before it kickstarted. So once they signed the decision, then they realized, no, we cannot implement this because there are certain fundamental requirements that are missing. And because of that, everybody played around with it and it never went far. Now, learning from Yamoussoukro, the crafters of the Single African Air Transport Policy ensured that we got the fundamentals right. And what are those fundamentals? The fundamentals are ensuring that we harmonize our differences as a continent. We want a single market. Currently, we don't have a single market. So if we want a single market, what do we need to be doing so that we can harmonize, at least for purposes of transport and movement of our people and trade? How do we ensure that we have that open border concept across the continent? So they came up with the regulatory text that will make that feasible. Then they realized, okay, when we begin to fly across borders, we would be independent airlines from either side of the border, but we are competing. So we need competition regulations. Wait a moment. That's right. If we don't get competition regulations right, then we could be so let's get competition regulations. Then again, we said, no, let's get consumer protection because we need to protect the interests of the consumers in an open market. So that also was done. Then we said, no, but considering that we are still sovereign states, that we are exercising the freedom to operate across borders, what if there's a dispute? How do we resolve those disputes? So we said, okay, let's build a dispute settlement mechanism. Above all of this, then we said, why don't we set up what is called an executing agency, a body that will be tasked with the responsibility of overseeing the implementation of the Single African Air Transport market across the continent, ensuring that where there are teething problems, where there are challenges, this body comes in to try and resolve those challenges so that we have a smooth implementation. So all of these things that I have mentioned were absent in the days of the Yamoussoukro decision. But today, under the Single African Air Transport market, they are in place. And that is where my excitement about the Single African Air Transport market comes in. That's why I'm saying too early to celebrate, but let's get very excited. We're very excited because doing the right things. And you know, like they say in my village, we are now using the tail of the monkey to tie the monkey itself. So eventually, these states who are harboring on their sovereignty, eventually we are getting them to unleash that sovereignty a bit so that we can move on with air transport liberalization. So this is where I think we need to be excited, but we need to continue to push the levers and all the stakeholders who are driving this initiative so that we do not slow down on the momentum of Single African Air Transport market.
Yeah, thank you for that, for those thoughts, Raphael. Yeah, so there's obviously something to be excited about. And over 20 years of patching things here and there, adjusting the regulatory framework. So we are obviously now in a better place to take the SAATM forward. Raphael, now that we are in a better place to take it forward, why must we wait for everyone to come around? What if we never get the full 54? Is it not possible? What are your thoughts on the implementation of the SAATM within the current number of signatories that exist? Yeah, what do you think about the let's go ahead and the rest will follow approach? Can't we go ahead and do it now that the main challenges have been addressed within the framework?
Yeah, this is precisely always my line of argument, that we don't need 54, 55 countries in Africa, depending on who you are speaking to agree before we move forward with the single African air transport market. We're talking about air transport liberalization across borders, across countries. So even if there are 5 countries that have agreed and have met all the requirements, let's forge ahead. I strongly believe that as the other states see these few countries implementing the single African air transport market and reaping the benefits, they would want to be part of the game. So fortunately, we've got 35 states now, and of the 35, 18 of them have signed the memorandum of implementation. Again, I talked a little bit earlier on about putting in place the fundamentals that were absent at the YB. Now, one of the fundamentals, after you have signed the SAATM commitment, which is a commitment by your state that you are willing to open the market to other African states on condition. The next thing is for you to sign a memorandum of implementation. To date, 18 African countries have signed the MOI. And what does the MOI require you to do? It asks you, now that you said you are willing through the solemn commitment to open up your market, can you now go to your regulations and see any of your regulations that are conflicting, air transport regulations that are conflicting with open market policy, and amend them so that they are aligned to the single African air transport market. Once you have done that, can you effectively communicate this to the other states who have also signed that, look, I have changed my regulations, I've amended my laws, so they are now all in line with the Yamoussoukro decision, and therefore, if you want to operate, know what the process is, do the necessary, and come through. Okay? So the 18 that have signed the memorandum of implementation are part of the 35 that have signed the solemn commitment. But for me, it's 18 too many. Let's get started. But let's also be very honest and frank that we are dealing with states. We're not dealing with individuals. And the state machinery grinds slower than we think, because there are interests to consider. So in some cases, it's not a quick fix. And that is why, even though you've signed the solemn commitment, when it comes to the implementing the elements within the memorandum of implementation, then you see that, okay, if you touch this aspect of our law, it probably has implications for other aspects. So let's do a comprehensive review. So states are going through the process of amending their laws to be in sync with the Yamoussoukro decision and with the single African air transport market. So we should understand the delay. But that should not stop any states that have completed that process from working together immediately, from opening up their markets immediately. And the others, as they amend their regulatory text, as they change their laws and as they align with YD, then they come on board as we go along. There's no point for us to wait. Let's move.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I'd like to take this to my colleague. Edmund was getting excited there as you were speaking. I'd like to give him a chance to perhaps give some remarks from what you've said. Mr. Edmund Makona, what are your thoughts after hearing Raphael's positive outlook?
I prefer to say that my bottle is half full and not half empty. I'm so excited in terms of the responses that we got from the aviation guru, Mr. Raphael Kuuchi. It's so much giving hope. I like the bit where he says it's time to get excited, but perhaps not real time to celebrate. So we are in deferred celebration mode. However, I think the other question that I would have wanted to raise to Raphael again, because he has answered most of the issues really, but it's the issue of this mutation of SAATM having mutated from the Yamoussoukro Declaration of 1988. Then in 1999, it now mutates to the Yamoussoukro decision, which initially had an implementation date of 2002. Now, 1988 to 1999, that's about 11 years. So if we had a child born 1988, by that time they were 11. Now, 2002, nothing happened. Now, 2018, we had the Africa Heads of State ratifying the single African air transport market. Now, we are now going into 2022, that's almost 4 years. There is visible progress, but I want Raphael for you to give us an assurance that we are not going to see another mutation of SAATM becoming another SAATM. And how do we expedite this process?
Thank you very much. You know, let me say that again, in my village, they say that, you know, the fact that your mother is taking long in the kitchen to come up with a dish doesn't mean you will starve.
Amen.
But the fact that the single African air transport market is taking some bit of time to realize doesn't mean it will not happen. I am an optimist. And like you rightly said, I always want to look at the glass half full. More so now, under the single African transport market, we are taking steps to address all the fundamental issues that in the past posed resistance. So once those are addressed, I don't see why the single African air transport market will not be implemented. It definitely will happen because the whatever is impeding it is what we are addressing today. I can agree and understand with the impatience of the aviation stakeholders, particularly around Africa, who are seeing our markets being taken away by non-African operators, and day in, day out, our volumes of traffic kept diminishing, whilst those of the non-African airlines keep growing. I can understand that, and I can empathize with that. We want a quick fix. But let's face it, if we are dealing with states, quick fixes are not long lasting. We're better off addressing the issues properly so that in future, we do not have some states getting up to block a market access for one reason or the other. And that is why, as I said, we have got the executing agency of the YD in place, and the executing agency, which is under the African Civil Aviation Commission, is in all steps to ensure that whatever it is that is required to be done by a state is done.
I totally,
so rest assured, African air transport market will not go the way of Yamoussoukro. Rest assured.
I totally agree with you, Raphael. It's a walk, walk and run approach. One, and I think we have no other option other than to get it there. And secondly, from where I come from, they also say one swallow does not make a summer. We need to ride on the experiences of the past so that we can become better. It's so exciting, Raphael. And last but not least, you know,
but let me just say this. Mm-hmm. Let me just add this. The other element, which is changing the dynamics, is that if you recall that during the days of Yamoussoukro in the 80s and 90s, African air transport landscape was largely dominated by state-owned.
Oh, true.
Today, we don't have many of those around. In their place, we are having private sector-driven airlines. And these airlines are hungry for opportunity.
So
and
true.
Looking forward to their governments unlocking the opportunities, because the days where governments will give money to an airline are long gone. And our airlines know that today. Unless you have an open, competitive market where you can, your best strategy is what keeps you in the business, then you have no business to do. So this is another dynamic that is going to propel the full implementation of the single African airline.
You seem to be answering what was supposed to be my next question. Because from where I come from, there is no advertisement for sugar here. In most countries that I have been to, and even from where I'm coming from, there is no advertisement for sugar. Why? Because it's known that sugar is sweet. Now, why is it that we are not seeing the same as far as the signature and implementation of SAATM is concerned by the African states, knowing fully well that the benefits accruing from signature and implementation of the single African air transport market are so immense that the viability of African airlines is and countries is guaranteed. What is it that needs to be done? What more needs to be done?
I like your analogy, but like, allow me to differ slightly, that your analogy of sugar does not necessarily apply in the case of an air transport liberalization. And if I can give you a very typical example, you know, when we were all born, we took breast milk. In breast milk is some sugar. And as we grow up, somewhere along the line, we tasted something sweet, something like sugar along the way. So we grew up naturally with the taste of sugar in us. We've moved from that stage up to the point where you can afford sugar. Then your taste buds naturally dictate that you must take some sugar.
Right.
Now, in the case of the single African air transport market, I tell you why it's different. Africa was one big global village. One, I tell you, until the Europeans came in. And then they started drawing lines and telling us, your brother doesn't belong to you, you don't belong to your brother. Somehow they got us to agree. And subsequent to that, we have now gotten to realize that, no, these ideas brought about by colonialists were never in our own interest. We need to come back together. So we're now trying to come back to that. So it cannot be the same as someone who has been tasting sugar all his life, all through. So we now coming together with some bitter past behind us, with some difficulties, that we encountered along the way as neighbors with some suspicions that have been created by no fault of ours, which we have to live with. I'm just being honest with you. So now we need to overcome our suspicions, we need to overcome our fears, we need to overcome our difficulties as neighbors to get to agree that the sum of the parts is bigger than the parts. In other words, we come back together, we are bigger, we are stronger, more effective than if we remain as small, independent African countries. And this is where SAATM comes in. So for me, the implementation of SAATM is not only about the regulatory text, about showing the benefits of it, but it is also about advocacy, about letting our people know and understand that, hey, guys, we stand to benefit more if we can trade with our neighbors. If I can fly across directly, is better than if I have to go to Europe or the Middle East before I come back to my country. Okay, these are the fundamentals we need to overcome. So we have a lot more work, and don't forget, whilst we are doing all this, I'm just being honest with you, whilst we're doing all this trying to implement SAATM, don't think for once that the ones who are eating our breakfast, lunch, and dinner by way of carrying the traffic from Africa, don't think they are happy. Don't think they are sitting down doing nothing about it. They are also seeing how they can disrupt us under SAATM. And that is where we all need to be vigilant, and we all need to push forward as a continental audience to make sure that Africa gets united, especially in terms of aviation, movement across borders, in terms of trade, in terms of tourism. Then we can begin to realize the full potential of this continent called Africa. So this is why we are not falling over each other yet, even though the benefits of SAATM are so glaring. Thank you.
It's so interesting, Raphael. I'm so excited by your presentation on the real issues, very, very factual. And in fact, it even takes us to the fact that even as we focus on SAATM, we must not forget the risk-based approach to implementation of issues. That even as we want to achieve success, anything else negative could impinge on our pathway. So I think even as far as the executing agencies are concerned, it's important to integrate into whatever we are doing the risk management of the issues that might negatively impinge on progress as far as implementation of SAATM is concerned. But this has been so exciting, Raphael. We thank you so much. I will hand you over to my colleague, Derek, to sum up issues and conclude this exciting session, which we believe will make a positive impact as far as global aviation is concerned. It is a force for good, and we all live to benefit from the best of aviation.
Thank you so much for your insights, Raphael, actually for both of you. One of my takeaways today, though, has actually been that where Raphael and Edmund come from, there's a lot of relatable life phrases that apply even to our industry. So it's very, very interesting, yeah, to listen to the both of you. Yeah, but this has been a very great discussion. And it's also good to understand that progress is certainly being made. The SAATM is not lagging. There's a reason to be optimistic. And that, as Raphael said, there's very many facets to the progress of SAATM. It's not just the signing up of different countries. It's the refining of the regulatory framework and the fundamentals, making sure that we have something that will be sustainable and something that will work for everyone across the industry going forward. There is no doubt that the SAATM is closer than we think to full implementation. I would like to bring in my colleague Tahir Mohammed as well to just sum up and say our goodbyes.
Very good, very good. Gentlemen, that was very, very intriguing. Being based in New York, in America, I feel that there's so much information that I've just learned that I need to share with the American audience. And having this group together, I think fulfills that dream. And Mr. Raphael Kuuchi, thank you very much for your support. And I understand that you're also moving forward and also would like to help the U.S. understand a little bit more about the African aviation. So very quickly, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your future in bridging the two continents to support each other as well. Just very quickly, please.
Well, just after leaving IATA sometime last year, I relocated to my home country, Ghana, where I'm currently based, and I am practicing as a management and aviation consultant. And so I am available. I'm working with a group called IDEC, and I'm still rendering some consultancy services also to the African Airlines Association based in Nairobi. And I am available, ready and willing to assist anyone who might have an interest either in investing in African aviation or in knowing more about African aviation, or wants to partner or perform any function at all within the aviation space on the African continent. I am available and ready to hold hand and show you the right ways around.
African aviation renaissance has taken flight, and thank you very much for your support.
With that, I'd like to close up the very first episode.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
AAR series. Thank you so much for those who have watched this episode. We ask you to keep a lookout for the next episode, and we'll keep bringing the modernization of African aviation to you, and more insightful topics to take the African aviation industry forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.